All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. Welcome to this academic writing workshop. My name is Brian McCarthy. I'm the academic leader for research in the School of Management, IT and Governance. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. I hope you're going to get from it exactly what you want to read at this particular point. This is really the first in a series of workshops on academic writing, and we're going to be publicizing about 6 or 7 altogether. But we will be sending out a list of all the various workshops. It's more or less every 2 weeks you can, if possible, to make it. And they're on different themes. So there's one, I think, next one's on the literature review chapter. Then there's one on academic style, writing style. Then there's one on the methodology. So we'll send you a list of all the various workshops that are coming up in the next couple of weeks so that you can sort of plan for it ahead of time.
I hope you noticed when Prof. MacArthur was talking about the workshops that we are going to run, that they're craftily designed to keep you going through your dissertation. So we're starting off with the introduction, then we'll talk about the literature review and using the literature in your research. Then there'll be stuff on methodology. Can you see how your chapters are beginning to flow? So hopefully you're going to take on an identity as a writer, and you're going to be moving through your dissertation as we move through those workshops. They've been sort of set up like that, so that by the time we get to October, we're talking about writing the conclusion, and November, we're talking about writing the abstract and editing the dissertation. Does that sound like a good trajectory? So if you can keep up with the workshops, we'll all run together. All right, so we're going to start out with the introduction, and you'll see, I've called it starting out with your reader, because this is one of the things that we're going to talk about today, is very often when we think about research, we think about finding out stuff and writing it down. And we're going to talk about how we relate to our reader, how we relate to the purposes that we have in our dissertation. If you're a postgraduate student, then you are beginning on a journey of scholarship. You are a becoming scholar. And so what comes after that, of course, is PhD, all the rest of it. So there's a whole trajectory of scholarship. So we're going to talk about your identity as a scholar today as well. So today's workshop is going to be an introduction to the whole series. And so I'm going to put in place some ways of thinking about writing and research that will underpin the approach that we'll take in the other workshops as well. Somebody in one of the workshops that I gave last week on introduction said, "Oh, I thought it was all going to be about grammar," and there was nothing about grammar at all. So if you think it's going to be about grammar, take a big sigh of relief. It's not going to be about grammar. Okay. Of course, grammar does come into writing, but that's not where we're going to focus at all. All right. So what we're going to do is, this workshop falls into 2 bits with T neatly in the middle. I'm going to give you a presentation, and we'll talk about writing and the underlying issues of writing, the things that we often don't talk about, the things that are often not made explicit for us as new researchers. And then we'll talk about the introduction itself and how it fits into the logic of the dissertation or the logic of the study that you're doing. Then we'll go into some detail around introductions and what they look like. Yes?
Maybe before you proceed, are you going to give us copies of your presentation, or we have to write whatever that we feel is important?
Well, I always write down in lectures and workshops simply because it keeps me awake. So if you need a technique to keep yourself awake, writing is a good way to go. I really wouldn't worry too much. If there's some gem of information that you think you'd like to keep, if you want me to send the slides, we can do that. But I'm going to give you handouts that have got the most important things that you need to know on them, the sort of really practical things about the introduction. Okay. This is a lovely small group, even though you guys look a bit far away in this big venue. So please stop me, ask me questions, argue with me. That would be fun. Please feel very free and relaxed. I listen to Radio SAFM in the mornings, and I'm told by my children, my grown-up children, that it's not cool. But anyway, I do listen to SAFM in the mornings when I feed my dog so that I can catch the 6 o'clock news. And they have one of the, it's actually the newsreader, who always says what day it is. You know, this is Women's Month, and every day somewhere somebody has decided this is the day of something. This is the day of being friendly. This is the day of being friendly. So let's hope that this is a friendly workshop. Do you know the people that you're sitting with? No. Well, then I suggest that you say hi to each other, because you're going to be working together. You talk to each other. Tell them what you're doing, where you are in terms of your dissertation, just for 2 minutes. We're going to make this a friendly workshop, seeing as this is the day for being friendly. So just share with the person sitting next to you how your dissertation's going, what you're doing. So we're going to talk about some underlying issues around writing. We're going to talk about introductions and how to structure them and how to think about what we're achieving through the introduction. It's a really important part of the dissertation, the beginning, introductions and conclusions, really important. And people sometimes stress over writing introductions, and sometimes they don't spend much time writing conclusions because they're getting to that magic date, the 30th of November, and they have to sort of hand in. But anyway, today the focus is on introductions. Then once we've had the sort of presentation part, we'll have tea, and then you're going to do some looking at introductions. We're actually going to look at them together and see introductions from research articles and from dissertations, and see how they develop and how the purposes of the introduction changes as we move through an introduction. There's certain important purposes that we have to achieve. So we'll have a look at that. Don't worry about writing everything down. I will be giving you handouts with the activities when we're analyzing introductions, which will have really the essence of what you would need to carry away from this with regard to introductions. Okay, any questions or queries, any burning issues that you hope we're going to talk about? At the evaluation that I'll give you at the end, I'm going to ask you, were your expectations met? So I'm assuming you've come with expectations. So perhaps you'll tell me in the evaluation stage what these were and whether we've met it. But please, we're here to talk to each other and to work together as researchers. So if there are things that you need to know or you want to talk about, this is the time to do it. Okay, I just want to show you a cartoon about writing, first of all. Can you read the writing there? Yes. That's one good thing about such a big screen. I wonder if any of you have ever felt like this about writing in the postgraduate course, or ever felt that? Writing is hard. Transferring from what's in your head onto the screen or the keyboard seems very difficult and complicated. So look at this poor postgrad student, getting closer and closer and closer to the screen, feeling I must transfer my thoughts. And then eventually she's banging her head on the screen and saying, they're touching, transmit, transmit. And sometimes we get so frustrated because we struggle with writing. We've got so much we want to say. There's so much information there. There are all these expectations from our supervisor and from this shadowy person, the examiner, who will be reading the dissertation and assessing it. So sometimes we get frustrated about writing because we think it should be easy. But there are more issues to it than simply transmitting something from your head onto the paper or onto the screen. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So as researchers, you are negotiating underlying issues of power and identity. Some of you are in workplaces where you have an identity there, a professional identity, a workplace identity, and you're part of the structures there, possibly a powerful part of the structures. But somehow, things feel different when you're a student writing a dissertation, because you're in a different environment where there are power issues and identity issues that are different from the other environments in which you function. And what I want to suggest to you is that in your discipline, the language and the thinking and the practices of the discipline, we call the discourse of the discipline. And not everything is appropriate that you can bring from other identities and other areas where you function. Not everything is necessarily appropriate in an academic, scholarly discipline. So we have to learn to position ourselves in our scholarly discourse, in the discourse of management, or in the discourse of IT, or whatever it is. We need to understand what is required of us in this new environment. So that is why sometimes writing is difficult, because we're dealing with not just issues about putting down facts on paper, but we're dealing with how to be a scholar, how to be a researcher in this discipline of mine. And supervisors are there to help us through this. Your supervisor mentors you through this. But sometimes, as academics, we don't always make explicit, perhaps, what our students need to know. So hopefully today, I'm going to try and make explicit some of the issues around identity and discourse in writing. So there are two things that I want to look at. The first is, how do you create an identity as a writer? I don't know how many of you, if I asked you to write 5 sentences about who you are, you know, I am a mother, I am a lecturer, I am an owner of 3 naughty dogs, whatever it is that I would write down. I don't know what you would write down, but would any of you write down, I am a writer? Maybe our friend who's involved in communication, would you identify yourself as a writer? Perhaps. But most of us would not identify ourselves as writers. And what I want to suggest to you today is that it's really important to identify yourself as a writer, because that is what you're doing in your dissertation. So you need to be a writer. You need to become a writer. Within your discourse, you need to be a writer. And at the last workshop, I quoted to the participants there a very short little formula for happiness that a philosopher called Nietzsche came up with. You don't even need to write this down, you'll remember it, it's so short. He said, the formula for happiness is a yes, a no, a straight line, and a goal. A yes, a no, a straight line, and a goal. So if we take that pattern as a formula for happiness, how are we going to become happy writers? How are we going to take on an identity as a confident, happy writer? So I'm going to suggest that with regard to writing, the first thing is the yes, is you need to own your topic, the problem. Some of you are still thinking out what you need to do, and that's a really important process, because you've got to find something that you need to know. And I could hear some passion coming out here with people. There were issues that you were engaged with, perhaps in your working environment. These are problems, questions that really you want to answer. So that would be the yes. Have a topic that you are engaged with, that you are passionate about, that you care about. Because then when writing becomes hard, the fact that you want to do this study is really important. It'll keep you going. So that's the yes of being a writer. Now, what's the no? Writing takes time. Thinking takes time. Reading takes time. All the things that we have to do as researchers take time. So we may have to say no to things in our lives for this period of time while we're engaged in writing. Some people nodding their heads, I think they already know that they've had to say no to certain things. Maybe, I don't know, you have to give up reading novels for a while, or you have to give up Facebook as a sort of a daily, hourly activity. Whatever it is, there's certain things. You've got to carve out time for writing. So you need to think for yourselves, where do I make space? Because that's what you're going to need. Then the bottom line I'm going to suggest is write every day. Bottom line, write every day. That's the straight line. Does it sound doable? Write every day. Good, yes, there's some enthusiasm from the front here. Oh, you're talking to... Oh, I was getting excited. I thought you were signing up for writing every day. But I think those of us who've been involved over years of writing, masters, doctorates, this sort of thing, we eventually have to say, you've got to be consistent. You've got to write every day. So I'm suggesting that as your bottom line. Write every day. And it doesn't matter if the time that you give initially is short. There's an interesting book called How to Finish Your Thesis, or How to Write Your Thesis in 15 Minutes a Day. And it caused quite a lot of consternation when it was published, because people said, ridiculous, how can you write a thesis in 15 minutes a day? But if you spend 15 minutes a day writing, then by the end of the week, you've spent more time than you would if you hadn't taken those 15 minutes every day. And the secret is that those 15 minutes actually begin to grow, because as you write, then you feel better about writing and you get engaged in what you're doing, and somehow you find more time to do things. Okay, so that's your goal as well, to try and spend, even if it's 15 minutes a day. So your bottom line is write every day, your goal is 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is that you think you can carve out of your day to write every day. Then hopefully when I see you at the next workshop, you'll be able to tell me that you've actually started writing every day. That would be amazing. Shall I check on you then? Okay. So we've talked about how to create an identity as a writer. And then issues of power within the discourse. Fox said this, which I think is a very useful way of looking at issues of power in discourse. Power is being able to craft a piece of writing so effectively that its purpose is achieved. Sorry, little typo there. That its purpose is achieved. Purpose is going to be a very important issue that we unpack now this afternoon. And the other word that's interesting there is craft a piece of writing. Writing takes working on. You write a draft, you have to go back, look at it again, work at it. You have to think about your reader, you have to think about your purpose, and you have to work with your text, crafting it into something that really achieves the purposes that you wanted to do. Then you are developing power within your discourse. Okay, any comments or questions? All right, let's move on then. Okay, so what I'm going to share with you now is a model of writing. just a simple triangle, and we're going to look at the 3 sides of the triangle, just as a way of thinking about what we are dealing with and what we're doing when we write in terms of research. Bottom of the triangle is content. That's what we really think about when we think about research. We think about reading, finding out stuff, writing it up. Maybe our supervisor is saying, well, you really need to have an argument here. You've got to put forward assertions. You've got to provide evidence for what you're saying. All those issues around creating an argument in your writing, being critical, all those things, all to do with content. But that's not the whole story. We also have to think carefully about the writer in the process. You, me. It's how we position ourselves in our writing as scholars. How we position ourselves as scholars. So that we bring something to the writing in terms of having something to say. And then the third part of the triangle, the audience. So with writer, we're actually talking about purpose. What's our purpose as a writer? What are we achieving? What are our strategies? What are our goals in our writing? Then with the audience, we are having to relate to somebody through our writing. We're having to communicate. So anytime we're writing for the purpose to communicate. So one of the things that we have to do is to see ourselves as communicating with a writer and allowing other viewpoints in our discourse to be evident in our writing. I'll give you an example of the sort of thing I mean. When you read academic journal articles, do you notice language like, this suggests that, it is possible that, it may be concluded that? That sort of language of being tentative, that's how you're relating to your reader and to your sort of discourse community. Because you're saying, I'm putting forward something here, I'm communicating an assertion, but I'm leaving space for the fact that not everybody may agree, that there may be other ways of looking at this. That's really an important part of writing, and you recognize it in the things you're reading, and you need to think about how you position yourself in relation to your reader and your discourse community as well. And then, of course, there's the other side of things, where people make strong assertions. It is significant that. It is clear that. This indicates clearly that. Those sort of strong assertions is also how you are relating to your audience, showing yourself to be able to make strong assertions based on good arguments. And you need to balance those two things. My favorite quote is from an applied linguist. That's my field. I'm an applied linguist, called Ken Highland, who wrote a paper about academic writers being the humble servants of their discipline. And he was talking about that kind of language where you show yourself to be tentative. You're putting forward a point of view, but you're not insisting on it. And he talked about being the humble servant of the discipline, that you're putting your suggestions out there, but in such a way that you're willing to acknowledge that other people might argue against them. So those are the kinds of issues that you're dealing with then in any text. You're dealing with content, argument, you're dealing with positioning yourself as a scholar in the field, and you're positioning yourself in relation to your reader, how you assert or how you are tentative in what you say in your arguments. So with all of those, then things like your strategies for writing, the organizational patterns that you use. As you set yourself up as a writer within your discipline, you've got to know what the appropriate organizational patterns are. When you write your research proposal, it's a different beast, isn't it, from the actual dissertation. Why? Because you have different purposes. Information flow, how one paragraph flows into another, one chapter flows into another. All these things are choices that you make in your writing, how to achieve these things. Style that you choose, what's appropriate in your discourse community, what conventions are appropriate, what referencing conventions are appropriate, all sorts of conventions. How you present your work in terms of actually putting it together in an acceptable format. All these sorts of things incorporate issues from that whole triangle. Okay. So not just content, but also positioning yourself as a scholar in your field and achieving your purposes as a scholar, and then relating to your audience, communicating with them and giving them your arguments, sometimes tentatively where you need to leave space, and sometimes